They know. Even if they never say it, even if they smile, deflect, or blame you, they know exactly what they did to you. And the truth most people don't tell you is this: their cruelty wasn't confidence, it was cover for shame. If this is resonating with you, pause for a moment, take a breath. And if you're finding clarity here, support your own healing by staying engaged, because understanding this dynamic is how you stop internalizing what was never yours to carry. Narcissistic shame is real, but it is deeply buried and rarely expressed directly, because for a narcissistic personality, shame is not a mild emotion. It is a psychological threat. From the outside, it may appear as if they feel nothing at all, as if they move on effortlessly or remain unaffected by the damage they caused, but internally, shame exists as something corrosive and dangerous that must be sealed off at all costs. This shame does not come from empathy or concern for your pain. It comes from the realization that their behavior exposed a flaw in the carefully constructed image they depend on to survive. They are not ashamed in a healthy, reflective way. Healthy shame leads to accountability, remorse, and repair. Narcissistic shame leads to denial, distortion, and emotional armor. Admitting fault would mean admitting limitation, and limitation shatters the false self they rely on to feel powerful, superior, or in control. Because of this, shame cannot be processed consciously. It is pushed down, split off, and disguised as something else. It often resurfaces as rage, contempt, mockery, or emotional withdrawal. When they feel shame, they may suddenly rewrite the relationship narrative, casting you as unstable, difficult, or ungrateful, not because it is true, but because it allows them to escape the internal collapse that comes with seeing themselves clearly. This is also why apologies, when they happen, feel hollow or transactional. They are not expressions of understanding. They are strategies to reduce discomfort or regain control. The narcissistic mind equates shame with annihilation, so it must be avoided rather than felt. When you remember that their lack of visible remorse does not mean lack of awareness, the confusion begins to lift. Their behavior after the harm, defensiveness, distancing, superiority is often the clearest evidence that shame exists beneath the surface, hidden, unspoken, and fiercely protected against exposure. Shame in a narcissistic personality rarely comes out as reflection or regret, because it is immediately converted into defensive behaviors that protect the ego from collapse. When they feel the discomfort of knowing they behaved cruelly, exploited you, or crossed moral boundaries, their system does not allow them to sit with that awareness. Instead, the shame is redirected outward and disguised as anger, dismissal, or rewriting of events. This is why conversations after harm often feel surreal. You are speaking about facts, actions, and emotional impact while they respond with accusations, sarcasm, or sudden emotional distance. Defensiveness is the first shield. By denying wrongdoing or minimizing your experience, they reduce the threat of shame reaching consciousness. If they can convince themselves that it wasn't that bad or that you are too sensitive, they no longer have to face the reality of their behavior. Anger often follows because it is easier to feel powerful than exposed. Rage creates emotional dominance, which temporarily silences the inner sense of defectiveness. In many cases, they will also rewrite history entirely. They may recast themselves as the victim and you as the aggressor, not because they believe it on a rational level, but because the narrative protects them from self-awareness. This distortion is not accidental. It is a psychological survival strategy. Shame threatens the core illusion that they are superior, justified, or entitled. Accepting responsibility would force them to confront limitations, dependency, and emotional emptiness. Minimization plays a similar role. By trivializing your pain, they avoid acknowledging its cause. Your overreacting is not just dismissal. It is a way to keep shame at bay. Even silence can be a defensive response. Withdrawal allows them to escape situations where their behavior might be questioned or reflected back to them. Understanding this pattern helps explain why accountability feels impossible with them. You are not dealing with a lack of intelligence or awareness, but with a system designed to avoid shame at all costs. The absence of genuine acknowledgement does not mean the shame isn't there. It means it has been converted into defenses that keep it hidden, distorted, and unresolved. When a narcissistic person senses that you see them clearly, a different and more destabilizing form of shame emerges, because being seen threatens the illusion they depend on to function. Their identity is built around a curated image of superiority, innocence, or entitlement, and your awareness punctures that image. This is not about you confronting them or calling them out. Often, it happens quietly. It happens when you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your reality, or stop reacting the way you used to. Your clarity communicates something they cannot tolerate. You are no longer confused. At that moment, they feel exposed, even if nothing is said aloud. Exposure creates shame because it removes their ability to control how they are perceived. Control is how they manage insecurity. When that control weakens, the internal fear is not, "I hurt someone," but "I have been seen as flawed." That realization destabilizes them more than anger ever could. This is why their behavior may suddenly shift when you detach. They may become cold, dismissive, or contemptuous, or they may escalate into provocation. These reactions are not confidence. They are attempts to restore dominance and obscure vulnerability. Being seen also threatens their sense of uniqueness and superiority. If you recognize their patterns, manipulation, or emotional emptiness, they lose the special status they assign themselves. Shame arises from the awareness that they are not exceptional, not misunderstood, and not above accountability. This is also why they often attack your credibility when they feel exposed. Discrediting you allows them to preserve the illusion that your perception is invalid. The goal is not truth, but self-protection. Even if they never consciously admit it, your awareness lingers as a psychological presence. They may avoid you, avoid shared spaces, or avoid conversations that could reflect their behavior back to them. Your clarity becomes something they cannot erase, and in that sense, exposure is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, steady, and deeply unsettling to someone whose survival depends on not being truly seen. When you begin to heal, grow, and detach emotionally, it creates a unique kind of threat to a narcissistic personality, because your progress undermines the very structure they rely on to regulate themselves. Their sense of stability depends on external validation, control, and the belief that they have power over how others feel and behave. Your suffering once confirmed their importance. Your confusion once reassured them of their influence. When you start to recover, that source of regulation disappears. This is why your healing triggers shame rather than relief. It quietly exposes the truth that they were never as powerful as they needed to believe. The false self they project requires someone else to stay small, dependent, or emotionally reactive. When you no longer orbit around them emotionally, the illusion weakens. Shame emerges from the realization that they could not break you permanently. They may tell themselves they never cared, that you were insignificant, or that your growth is fake or temporary. But these narratives exist to manage the discomfort of being proven wrong. Your healing also confronts them with the consequences of their behavior without you having to say a word. It answers the unspoken question they avoid. If they were truly superior, why didn't they destroy you? This creates an internal contradiction they cannot resolve. Rather than inspiring reflection, it produces defensiveness, dismissal, or contempt. They may devalue your progress, mock your boundaries, or accuse you of changing for the worse. These reactions are not about you. They are attempts to reassert dominance and neutralize shame. Growth in another person highlights their emotional stagnation. Your increased self-trust contrasts with their reliance on manipulation. Your peace highlights their inner chaos. That contrast is painful for someone who cannot tolerate self-examination. This is why they may attempt to pull you back in just as you begin to thrive. Re-engagement offers them a chance to restore the old dynamic and escape the shame your independence provokes. Understanding this dynamic helps you see that your healing is not an act of cruelty or revenge. It is simply the natural outcome of choosing yourself. And in doing so, you unintentionally expose the fragility of the false self they work so hard to protect. For a narcissistic personality, accountability is not just uncomfortable, it feels psychologically intolerable because it requires acknowledging limitation, harm, and emotional responsibility. To take accountability would mean admitting that they were wrong, that their actions caused pain, and that they are not as morally justified or emotionally superior as they believe themselves to be. This level of self-awareness directly activates shame, and shame, for them, is experienced as a threat to their very sense of self. Rather than feeling like a moment of growth, accountability feels like collapse. This is why even gentle attempts at discussion often trigger disproportionate reactions. A simple request for acknowledgement can be met with rage, sarcasm, stonewalling, or complete denial. These reactions are not signs of confusion. They are signs of a system defending itself. Vulnerability would require them to stay present with discomfort without escaping into blame or control, and that is a capacity they do not have. Their internal world is organized around avoiding emotional exposure. When accountability is required, the easiest escape is attack. By shifting focus onto your flaws, tone, or past mistakes, they move the spotlight away from themselves. Another common escape is avoidance. Silence, disappearing, or refusing to engage allows them to bypass the emotional reckoning altogether. In some cases, they may offer performative accountability, using rehearsed phrases or surface-level apologies that sound correct but lack emotional depth. These are not acts of repair. They are strategies to end the conversation and relieve pressure. True accountability would require sustained empathy, consistency, and change, all of which demand a stable inner sense of self. Without that foundation, accountability becomes unbearable. This is also why they often frame accountability as unfair or abusive. Being asked to reflect feels like an attack because it threatens the illusion of innocence they rely on. Understanding this helps explain why waiting for closure through accountability often prolongs pain. The absence of responsibility is not proof that your experience was invalid. It is proof that facing it would have required a level of emotional integrity they simply do not possess. Silence and firm boundaries often provoke more shame in a narcissistic personality than confrontation ever could, because they remove the narcissist's primary tools for managing insecurity. Confrontation gives them something to push against. It allows debate, deflection, gaslighting, and emotional chaos, all of which restore a sense of control. Boundaries and silence do the opposite. They create an emotional vacuum where manipulation cannot land. When you stop explaining, stop arguing, and stop reacting, you are no longer participating in the narrative they depend on. This absence forces them to face a reality they cannot easily distort. They no longer have access to you. Shame arises not because they miss you emotionally, but because the loss of access signals a loss of power. Power is how they regulate self-worth. When that power is removed, the internal discomfort they've been avoiding surfaces. Silence communicates something words never could, that you have evaluated the situation and chosen yourself. That decision reflects back on them. It implies that their behavior crossed a line severe enough to warrant disengagement, even if they deny it outwardly. This implication is felt internally. Boundaries also expose the asymmetry in the relationship. When you enforce limits calmly without rage or pleading, it highlights the contrast between your emotional regulation and their lack of it. That contrast triggers shame because it undermines their sense of superiority. This is why boundaries are often met with mockery, dismissal, or sudden attempts to provoke a reaction. Any reaction, even negative, reestablishes relevance. Silence denies them that relief. In some cases, they may escalate behavior, spreading narratives, seeking attention elsewhere, or attempting to re-enter your life indirectly. These are not signs of indifference. They are attempts to regulate the shame that arises when control is lost. Understanding this dynamic helps you stay grounded when silence feels uncomfortable or cruel. You are not punishing them. You are protecting yourself. The discomfort they experience is not caused by your boundary. It is caused by the reality your boundary reveals, that access to you was never a right, and losing it has exposed something they would rather not feel. A narcissistic person's intense need to control the narrative is rooted in a deep fear of being seen as flawed, ordinary, or morally accountable. Their self-concept depends on a carefully managed story in which they are justified, misunderstood, superior, or victimized. When that story is threatened, shame surfaces. Rather than tolerating that shame, they attempt to overwrite reality itself. This is why facts often seem irrelevant in interactions with them. What matters is not what happened, but how it is framed. By shaping the narrative, they protect the false self from exposure. If they can define you as unstable, ungrateful, or cruel, then their behavior becomes reasonable by comparison. This is not always a conscious scheme. It is an automatic defense designed to preserve psychological safety. Being seen as flawed would mean acknowledging internal emptiness and emotional dependency, which they cannot tolerate. Controlling the narrative also allows them to avoid self-reflection. If the story is fixed and externalized, there is no need to look inward. Any challenge to their version of events feels like an attack, not because it is aggressive, but because it destabilizes the identity they rely on. This is why they may react so strongly to neutral statements or simple truths. The goal is not mutual understanding, but dominance over meaning. They may recruit others, exaggerate details, or selectively omit context to maintain the illusion of innocence. This behavior often intensifies when you stop defending yourself. Your refusal to participate removes their primary source of validation. Without your engagement, the narrative becomes less convincing, even to them. That loss of reinforcement triggers anxiety and shame. Controlling the story is how they manage that anxiety. Understanding this helps you disengage from the trap of self-justification. You do not need to correct every lie or defend every detail. Truth does not require performance. Their insistence on control is not evidence of strength. It is evidence of fear of being seen without the mask they work so relentlessly to maintain. When you reach a place of clarity, even without confrontation or explanation, it forces a reckoning they cannot fully escape. Your clarity does not need to be spoken aloud to be felt. It shows up in your posture, your boundaries, your lack of emotional urgency, and your refusal to chase understanding from someone who never offered it. This clarity reflects their behavior back to them in a way that cannot be argued with. They may deny it verbally, dismiss it publicly, or pretend indifference, but internally it registers as a quiet confrontation. They are faced with the reality that someone experienced them fully and chose not to stay confused, dependent, or broken. That realization triggers shame because it disrupts the fantasy that they are untouchable or exempt from consequence. Even if they never consciously process it, your clarity becomes an internal reference point they cannot erase. It challenges the narrative that you were weak, needy, or inferior. It suggests that the problem was never your inadequacy, but their behavior. This is deeply unsettling for someone whose identity relies on superiority. They may attempt to outrun this awareness by seeking new validation, creating distractions, or immersing themselves in external success. But the contrast remains. Your grounded presence highlights their internal instability. This is why they may avoid you entirely or react strongly if reminded of you. You symbolize a truth they would rather not acknowledge. The power of this dynamic lies in its quiet nature. You are not punishing them. You are not proving a point. You are simply no longer participating in the illusion. That absence forces them to sit with what remains. Whether they face it honestly or bury it again is not within your control. What matters is that your clarity restores your sense of self. It removes you from the cycle of self-doubt and emotional bargaining. In doing so, it shifts the dynamic permanently. They may never admit shame, but the change in their behavior, avoidance, defensiveness, or dismissal often reveals its presence more clearly than words ever could. Your clarity does not need validation to be real. It stands on its own, grounded in self-trust, and that stability becomes the unspoken consequence they carry forward. Even if they never acknowledge it aloud,